but as close as if you want to hold your phone, honestly, like to your mouth, that would be great. That we can have different audio.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll start a voice memo right now.
Okay. All right, let me pull up your questions and then let's get situated.
Ryan, my name is Mason Cobbler. I am one of three Virginia Tech 2022 homecoming winners.
All right. So Mason, it's been, some months since we last spoke. How's everything been? School, life, and everything in between?
Yeah, everything's been great. Kind of last minute in the fall, I decided that I was interested in graduating early. Kind of with my long term, job outlooks and everything like that, it worked out, and I was able to graduate early, which was a huge honor. I was super excited. And I've kind of taken a break from everything. I wanted to step back. I had kind of a stressful last semester and I experienced a lot of burnout, but since then I've had an amazing break. I've been able to make a lot of great memories, spend time with a lot of good friends, and I'm excited. I'll be back in Blacksburg in the middle of March, and that's when I plan on kind of fulfilling my commitment for my homecoming platform.
Awesome. So on the topic of your homecoming platform, can you give an update on the stages of execution or planning for your platform? And can you remind us what your platform is?
Yeah. So my platform is understanding and overcoming negative body image. And for this, my main focus is really to target that male demographic at Virginia Tech. There's not a lot of resources for men who have struggled with negative body image and things along that line. So I've been working with Laura Fitch, who is the program manager for the Body Project at Virginia Tech. It is traditionally kind of an all girls program and is specifically targeted towards Greek life. And I've been working with her. We met in person in the fall before I left, and we've been emailing back and forth. And we're looking to kind of collaborate and her using my, in within Greek life and my expertise kind of struggling with this issue personally to really help target the male demographic at Virginia Tech in the best way we can. In terms of the actual event that we plan on putting on, a lot of things are still up in the air. Some ideas have been thrown around, but we're really looking to kind of nail that down here over the next few weeks.
All right. So even though your event is still up in the air, when someone does come to the event, it could be anyone of any identity or any demographic. What is one thing you want them to take away from the event?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I want people to take away from the event is I want people to go there and for them to feel comfortable showing up to the event. Especially for guys within that kind of target demographic we were talking about, especially within like Greek life, for example. For a lot of men, it's a hyper masculine environment where kind of putting yourself out there and being vulnerable isn't always the most kind of popular thing to do. So I really want people to be able to come there to feel safe, feel comfortable. And regardless of whether or not that's a guy in Greek life, if it's anybody at Virginia Tech, I want them to go there and to really find out about the resources that Virginia Tech has to offer. And ultimately to be able to come out of that event and feel like they know the next steps that they need to take in terms of helping themselves kind of deal with those struggles.
Awesome. And something that the board did this year that was different from any other year was we kind of built the homecoming experience, which is the portfolio for kind of visual and film. And the first addition to that was the Homecoming Court 72 Questions project. So for your segment, for your sequence, going into it, what did you do to prepare your answers? And when someone watched it, a prospective voter, what is one thing that you were intentional about in your answers?
Yeah. I think going into the 72 questions kind of interview, I didn't really think through or prepare any major answers. Of course, it was hard to. There was a ton of questions we could have been asked, and that was something that homecoming board kind of went over beforehand. So I think going into that, I tried to just be my most genuine self. I think for the prospective voters, it's hard to get to know somebody in a few questions. So in that, I tried to just be as genuine as I could and just answer something like how like in the moment I thought best showed who I was as a person.
Yeah. So going into homecoming week, or even honestly before homecoming week, how did you feel about having your all your support system? Who was your support throughout the process?
Yeah. Um, so there's a few people I have to shout out. First and foremost, and really the reason I ran for homecoming was one of the previous royalty winners, John Moss.
Okay.
He was really a big mentor of mine, a guy I looked up to within my organization, Alpha Tau Omega. And he was kind of the guy who first inspired me to run for homecoming after seeing like the amazing campaign he ran. And he was like one of those guys I really leaned on throughout the process. We talked multiple times over the summer. We talked multiple times before homecoming week. So he was a huge help. Also, my family. That was really the first time that I kind of like seriously talked to my family about those issues that I'd been dealing with. And they were a big support system. My sister was a big help. She used a lot of her expertise in marketing and working with Instagram and stuff like that to give me some tips on things to do. And then also really like all the people I had met throughout the process. There was so many people who were on homecoming court who really just motivated me to work as hard as I could. Um, I think I saw how where I really envied everybody's passion that they had for their platforms. And I think in seeing that, that motivated me to work even harder. One in preparing for that week and then kind of executing the plans throughout that week.
Yeah. So speaking of homecoming week, what were the emotions going into that week? Was it like the first day of school? Was it like a big test? Like what was it?
Yeah. I think there were a lot of unknowns at first. Kind of when you're first going through that week, the boothing process is a little funky. It's kind of weird just all of a sudden, especially if somebody's walking by with like music in to kind of go up and be like, hey, could I have a few seconds of your time to talk to you about this amazing platform? So I think at first you kind of had to knock the rust off. And then after that, it was it was kind of a breeze going through the rest of the week in terms of talking to people. There was a lot of unknowns in terms of kind of the atmosphere and the kind of the general feel for how some of the events worked. Kickoff and the talent show, all sorts of stuff like that. You you hear about these plans and you're like, this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be, and then you show up and you have no idea if that's actually how it's going to work out. So I think there were a lot of unknowns, and going into that, I was definitely a little uneasy. I was definitely a little nervous, but it was a great time. Everything I feel like through kind of that the struggle of the unknown, you came out of the event having an even better expectation and better realization for how everything went.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about the showcase. I can't talk about the showcase without that performance that y'all did. So how did that come to life?
Yeah. Well, first I have to give a shout out to Kayla Hess, one of the other members on Homecoming Court, doing the whole Tom Holland dance, the lip sync battle. That was really her main idea, and it was funny. We were preparing, and a lot of that preparation happened kind of beforehand, but we didn't really have a chance to practice a ton in person with, me, her, Courts, and Reed, and Chase. And then finally, when it came together, um, that was definitely like a moment of vulnerability in front of a large amount of people. Definitely an embarrassing thing, but at the end of the day, like I had a great time, and I think kind of putting yourself in that situation, if anything, just makes you more comfortable when you're experiencing anything like that in the future.
Yeah. So I guess jumping to something even more exciting, game day. What was it like being in front of tens of thousands of people and hearing your name called by President Sands?
It like words can't even describe. It was a super cool opportunity. Both my parents are actually Hokies, and they come to tech games all the time. They've been season ticket holders for the longest time. So having to choose between my parents on which one I was gonna bring onto the field was a little bit of a long conversation that needed to be had. But going into that, I was extremely nervous. we had to get there early. We were sitting in the stands just talking, trying to like ease the nerves. But there's nothing more electrifying than walking onto that field in front of, like you mentioned, tens of thousands of people. And I remember because I was the third announced winner. I remember seeing Tim Sands mouth my name, and then you hear it over the loudspeakers. And I just turned to my mom, and like the first thing I did was I gave her a big hug. And it, like, in the moment, it didn't feel real. I couldn't believe it. And it was all like a fever dream. And finally, like, once things really kicked in, I got to see my family. I got to meet Tim Sands in person. I think that has to be one of my best memories of college.
Wow, that's awesome. I think yeah, being on the field was crazy, and just seeing. I think when I was kind of on the field with y'all, I was watching the parents' reactions because that was the best.
Yeah.
Reactions. Your mom had a great reaction. Reed, it was great. So I guess looking holistically at the homecoming process, the planning, the week of homecoming, what is your favorite part, or what was your favorite part about the whole thing?
I'd have to say my favorite part about the whole thing was the opportunity to interact with so many students at Virginia Tech. I think everybody in some way can relate to the fact that throughout their college experience, you seem to kind of form a bubble around you of the people you're hanging out with, the organizations you're interacting with. And within that, kind of with homecoming, I was forced to go to talk to other organizations. And with that, like, it was an amazing opportunity. I met some great friends. I had the opportunity to connect with a lot of people I remember talking to freshman year that I hadn't seen in forever. And it was so cool being able to run into them again. And even not even just specifically organizations, just sitting at the booth and being able to talk to people, and you'll sit down, and some people will, they'll give you a few minutes of their time, and some people will really sit there and have a conversation with you and kind of tell you their story and how they relate to the platform, and how it means so much to them what you're doing. And I think that that interaction and having the opportunity to touch so many parts of Virginia Tech, I think that was for me way more meaningful, than as you mentioned, like my name being called and being a royalty winner. So for me, like it was all about that. It was having that kind of whole circle Virginia Tech experience.
Yeah. So, tackling your favorite part, what is your, I guess, your least favorite part, if you had a least favorite part of the homecoming process?
Ooh, um, I think my least favorite part was probably like the week to 2 weeks leading up to homecoming week. I just think there was a lot of pieces to that puzzle that at first seemed super out of place. And I think that kind of anxiety of the unknown, and that nervousness for me was probably the worst part. And then once things kicked off, I was able to hit the ground running. And from there, I was so busy doing stuff that I didn't have time to sit there and be nervous. But yeah, I think that's like that period before is probably my least favorite part.
Yeah. And looking at homecoming 23, we'll see you again for the parade, obviously, in October. But in the meantime, we're bringing together, interviews for the next year's homecoming court. So what pieces of advice do you have for them?
I think the biggest piece of advice I have for them is I think it's two things. One is you cannot do enough planning, whether it's you're thinking about flyers or you're thinking about A-frames or stuff like that. Doing that stuff, turning that stuff in as quick as possible will take a huge weight off your shoulders, figuring out your t-shirt design, everything like that. Doing as much as you can before the week starts is extremely helpful. And then the thing that kind of piggybacks off that is, of course, you have your sponsoring organization who's a huge help, but I think kind of finding that core group of people who are going to be the people who help you set your booth up at 7:30 in the morning when it's freezing cold outside, or it's raining or stuff like that. I think having that group of people to where you can rely on, and you'll text them like, "Hey, could you go get me Hokie Grill or something like that? I haven't eaten in 9 hours." That group of people is a huge help, and you can't thank them enough, and you can't have enough of them. So I would say that's my biggest piece of advice.
Great. So as we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share that I haven't asked you about?
Um, I think really the last thing that I kind of want to touch on is one of the kind of groups of people I didn't shout out throughout this process was, of course, uh, the homecoming board. Um, so many people, they see homecoming week, they see all the candidates, who are out boothing, they see the people who get recognized on the field. And that's awesome. I'm very thankful to be a part of that group of people, but the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes is tremendous. And I feel like you guys don't get enough credit, excuse me. You guys don't get enough credit. Um, Molly, Ashley, everybody else on board. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you guys for everything you've done. And I really appreciate you guys and all your help in providing this opportunity to me.